Bitcoin is the protocol for money. We live in a digital world where almost everything has been digitized: communication, music, photography, etc., except for money. We're still living on a fiat standard. So the final puzzle piece for the internet is the money protocol, and that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the protocol for money. And finally, Bitcoin. What has that made cheaper? Trust. And trust is a massive thing in human life. We're still living on a fiat standard, and money is being digitized, and this is Bitcoin. And currently, Bitcoin is only worth 0.21%, another 21, 0.21% of the total global capital. I think that's the fundamental way to think about Bitcoin, is that it's a ledger, and actually it's a perfect ledger. It's one that's never been hacked, and it's the ultimate in trust.
Anyone that truly understands Bitcoin gets more excited about the days, the weeks, the months when it's down instead of when it's going up, because it means for every dollar we can get more Satoshis or more Bitcoin for that dollar. So they're actually a blessing.
We never really had a protocol for value exchange on the internet. And, you know, the fiat monetary system has basically just tried to be, you know, kind of shoved into this internet system to try to make it work. But, you know, it's been incredibly inefficient and, you know, full of holes, you know, massive security holes. And that's why the banks have their huge, you know, compliance departments, because of all the issues that happen online trying to use the fiat monetary system. So the final puzzle piece for the internet is the money protocol. And that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the protocol for money, the $53 trillion opportunity, which would kind of represent, you know, a bit of a prediction for a market cap of Bitcoin in 10 years' time, which is kind of similar to some other predictions out there as well. But I kind of walk through, you know, how that's possible. And then also touch on a bit of, you know, there's a lot of shitcoinery going on out there. There are a lot of like Bitcoiners will notice. I try to stay out of it, because when you argue with those guys, it just doesn't go anywhere. But sometimes,
well, they lack common sense, bro. So there's just zero reasoning.
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself ending some of these arguments with, "You're doing great," you know, just leave it there. So let's start with exponential growth. And exponential growth equals progress, and we get exponentials everywhere in life, and it's one of those ideas that's incredibly hard for us to understand. So it can seem like we're living in difficult times and that things are actually getting worse, but the reality is that in most areas we're actually getting better and better. So here's just a few examples here, where, you know, child mortality rates going down, deaths from infections going down. And this is taking like a zoomed out view. Deaths from malnutrition down, global mortality rate down, labor force in agriculture down, extreme poverty rate going down. And then, of course, we've got some others going up. So literacy going up, life expectancy going up, and GDP per capita going up. And I mean, if you take a short-term view, some of these can obviously dip down, and you can start feeling like you're living in, you know, the worst of times. However, reality is that in most areas we're getting better and better. So I think, as Bitcoiners, we think more positively, right? And I know definitely for me. And so, you know, positive thinkers get positive results. And there's a great quote: "Whether you think you can or you can't, you are right."
It's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
No, I love it, man.
Yeah. It's important to understand the history of ledgers and money, and what they mean. You know, what is money, and why do we have ledgers? And understanding what money is and needs to be gives you an appreciation of the power of Bitcoin and why it's the best money ever invented, or some people say discovered. So humans started living together about 13,000 years ago in modern day Israel and Jordan. And they started trading, of course. I think, you know, trading has been around for a long, long time, of course. Trading things like wool, wood, or wheat. And for that trading, where would they keep the records? And they would have been kept in the mind. And especially when you're operating in your small social circles within your village, then, the trust that you need is kept in your mind. You remember who's bought what and who owes what. But if you want to trade with another village, you maybe didn't have the same level of trust, and maybe you had no trust. So that's where actually writing was invented. It was actually invented 5,000 years ago, not to communicate, but to maintain a record and to maintain a ledger of transactions. And then from here, about 2,500 years ago, gold coins were invented. And this was the thing that allowed you to trust someone far away, because gold was authentic and you could trust gold, and it was recognizable, and obviously gold has got some excellent qualities for money. Then after that, about 1,200 years ago, paper currency was invented, and paper currency was backed by gold or silver or a commodity. And of course, you would need to recognize this paper currency in order to accept it. So there was a few that were widely recognized and could be used in place of gold, for example. And then from here, you had the Medicis, who were an Italian family who invented banking. And what is banking? Well, banking is essentially just a ledger, and it keeps a record of who paid what and how much each customer has stored in the bank. What's your bank balance, for example? And that's what modern day banking is. It's simply a ledger of transactions. Bitcoin is the protocol for money. It's the protocol for value exchange. And that's the way to think about Bitcoin. Like it's not just a technology. It's not a software project. Bitcoin is software, but that's just a tiny part of it, right? It's a protocol for value exchange, just like other foundational internet protocols. And so I think that's a key misconception that, Bitcoin is just another piece of software or passing technology that's going to be replaced. There's going to be a better Bitcoin, which, so many of the shitcoin projects like to tell you. And unfortunately, so many people get sucked in by. And I completely understand, because I was once sucked in too years ago, thinking that Ethereum sounded great, World Computer, all this sort of stuff. So it was the early internet. It was like static websites that you couldn't really interact. It was just, like news websites and blogs and things like that. And then we went to Web 2, which was read, but also write. So you could actually interact. And this is things like Facebook and YouTube and Uber. And it allowed you to, share and interact with the internet and with other people. But the platforms themselves owned the data. So it was, centralized control, like big tech, centralized control. And then with Bitcoin was the start really of Web 3.